Hi friends, I'm Chelsea and I am here with my June reading wrap up. So June was probably the best reading month I've had in a long time. I'm very excited about the books I read and I can't wait to share with you about them. So I read 8 books total. I did have one DNF, but the 8 books that I read, I pretty much loved all of them. My lowest rating was a 3.75 star, I think, and everything else was like a 4 to 5 star. All of these I would literally recommend to you. I ended up reading about half of my TBR, so not very successful with the TBR completion. I did attempt to read 3 other ones. I was in a major mood reading mood, so I did manage to read some for my TBR, but then I was just feeling like kind of branching out from that a little bit. So anyway, I'm going to share with you about these books I read in June. I started the month strong with Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I already talked about this in my mid-year freakout tag, so I won't spend a ton of time on it. I will just tell you a little bit. So this is the second book in the Stormlight Archive, in case you have not heard of it. This just continues the major storyline. There's a lot of things going on that I can't tell you about because it would spoil it. This is a great book because all the main characters pretty much get together at some point during this book, and it's all this build up that finally happens, and all of their interactions are just so satisfying, really fun and entertaining to see. And this one mainly follows Shalon, who is one of the main characters. She's like this scholarly character who's trying to learn about the history of this world, her place in it, but she also has a lot of secrets from her past that we learn throughout the book. So this has a lot of her POV and her backstory, but it also follows Kaladin and Dalinar, the main other 2 characters, as well as lots of the other side characters that we got in the first book. I read this in a week and a half. I devoured it, I listened to it and read it, so that was just like full immersion, which I highly recommend. It started just a tiny bit slow for me, but then it really picked up and was like a lot of nonstop action, a lot of big reveals, twists and turns, a lot of great battle fight scenes, and just more mystery. I just really loved learning more about this world and the magic and how the storms kind of play into that. Definitely had an ominous feel and lots of humor and great banter, which I did not expect coming into these books. I don't know why. I just think epic fantasy is so much about the politics and the intrigue and the battle scenes, and there's a lot of that, but also lots of just really funny, humorous moments and great banter. Just more character development, especially with Shalon, like I said, but with everyone. I really love Shalon and Kaladin's dynamic. If you read these books, you will understand why, probably. I just feel really attached to these characters by now. Lots of found family and a tiny hint of romance, which I was not expecting, but just a little bit. I feel like I can't say a lot of details about the plot and stuff, but I am just loving the series right now. This was a 5-star for me, and I probably liked it even slightly more than Way of Kings, although both were just really fun. So as usual, I like to read a quote, and this is a quote that Kaladin is saying about Shalon. He saw it in her eyes, the anguish, the frustration, the terrible nothing that clawed inside and sought to smother her. She knew. It was there inside. She had been broken. Then she smiled. Oh, storms, she smiled anyway. It was the single most beautiful thing he'd seen in his entire life. Next, I read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. So these were 2 5-star reads in a row. I'll just tell you that I am very happy I finally read this. This had been on my TBR for years, and my book club read it in June. It's probably my new favorite romance of all time, potentially. So this one follows Eva and Shane, who basically when they were teenagers, they met and had this really passionate love affair, basically, where they spend a week together, and then something happens that draws them apart. They don't see each other for 15 years, and then they suddenly meet up again in New York as adults. They're both writers, so they meet at this literary event. They basically spend another week together in June and try to figure out is this worth another shot? Can we pick up the pieces? And you also get a lot of other elements, Eva is a single mom and she has chronic migraines and just some health struggles. And then Shane, he is recovering alcoholic, so he's working on being sober. He is spending a lot of time I'm mentoring these downtrodden kids who just don't have much going for them, and he's trying to redirect his energy to help other people. So you get a lot of elements of their lives, but you also get a lot of the romance. So this was an emotional roller coaster. I definitely cried multiple times. It's definitely very heavy, sad. So if you're looking for like a light, fluffy romance, this is not it. But it does have some funny, lighthearted moments, and obviously it's very romantic. It's got some steamy moments. It just combines all the things I love in a romance. Like, it made me feel things, and you have other things in their lives going on other than just the romance, but a really mature, adult, honest romance. I don't know how else to put it. I love the themes of motherhood also, not only with Eva as a mother, but her really complicated and not great relationship with her own mom. There's also, like I said, themes of like addiction and sobriety. These are both Black characters, so you have that element of their experience being Black. You also have a focus on like chronic and invisible illness with Eva, which I really appreciated. I just loved the depth of this, and I just really related to these characters a lot. I loved how the book was written. You have like the flashbacks and then the present day, and it's all like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like going throughout the week, 15 years apart. Definitely felt their chemistry. They just like really see each other as people, really just like push each other to be better and to be their own person, just their own individual journeys of like going through their struggles and trying to heal as people, and then bringing that together as a couple. I just really loved. I think second chance romance might be something I'll have to look more into, because I do like more of a slow burn. I highly recommend this one if you're looking for a deep, heavier, but beautiful, heartwarming, real romance. And I loved the New York vibes. That was fun. Let's see, let me find a quote. And maybe that was what real adult love was, being fearless enough to hold each other close, no matter how catastrophic the world became. So after this is where I kind of derailed from my TBR a little bit. I had a thriller on my TBR. It was Only If You're Lucky by Stacey Willingham. I did listen to like an hour of it, and I wasn't like not enjoying it, but for some reason I had this other thriller in my head that I really wanted to listen to instead, and I was just thinking about that. So I ditched Only If You're Lucky, and I listened to Kill For Me, Kill For You instead by Steve Kavanaugh. I just heard a lot of stuff about this, people saying it's like their new favorite thriller, and I wanted just a really good fast-paced thriller, because I hadn't really had a 5-star thriller since None of This Is True, which I read back in the fall. This one literally is what it sounds like. Two strangers meet each other, Amanda and Wendy, I think. They have tragically had their daughters be murdered by these terrible men, and they meet in like a grief group, and they make this pact or agreement that they will kill the other person for each other. And as you can imagine, it kind of spirals from there. And then at the same time, there's this character named Ruth, and she and her husband live in New York City. They all live in New York City, I should say. You don't really know how or if she's connected to them at all, but she has her own thing going. There's a break-in at her house one night. She does not die, but the man who breaks into her house injures her and very badly like traumatizes her, and all she knows is that he had blue eyes. And so she and her husband are pretty much on this mission to find the man with the blue eyes. That's all I can tell you. You kind of have these two different POVs going on. While this was not a full 5-star, this is my favorite thriller since None of This Is True. So a successful read. This was very gripping pretty much from the very beginning. I was hooked early on and just wanted to keep listening. It started with a bang, and then it was kind of slow for me, all the build up, but then once you got to like 50% mark, I just could not stop listening, and my jaw dropped at the major twists. I did not see those coming. I didn't have any correct predictions, which is what I want in a thriller. There are just so many twists and turns, especially at the end. I feel like the writing was really smart. It kind of threw me off and kept me guessing. This one is just a quick read, like short chapters. It was just suspenseful. There's definitely a theme of like rich and powerful men doing whatever they want and not getting punished or held accountable. And it kind of went into the ramifications of like deciding to take the law in your own hands and decide to kill someone. I definitely found myself rooting for some characters that maybe I shouldn't have been. I find that always interesting when you have this moral dilemma. I just thought it was a really well done thriller. I had never read this author before. I want to check out more of his books. I don't have any quotes. I couldn't really find any online, but really good thriller, highly recommend. So I was in a mystery thriller mood and I just kept it going. So next I listened to Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. This is more like on the murder mystery, true crime side, not as much of like fast-paced thriller. I did try to listen to another book on my TBR, The Final Revival of Opal and Neb, which is like a historical fiction, kind of like Daisy Jones and the Six. I was liking it, but I was just in a big thriller mood, so I wanted to save it for the right time, so I put that one down. And yeah, I listened to this one. So I mentioned this in one of my videos recently. It's about Lucy, who has been accused basically by everyone in her small town of killing her best friend Savvy. She doesn't remember what happened. No one knows what happened. So they just accuse her and she pretty much just assumes that that's the truth as well. And so there's this true crime podcast called Listen for the Lie, and Ben Owens is the main podcaster. He's interviewing people from her town for his current season, trying to figure out what actually happened. And Lucy and Ben get together. There is a little bit of a romance going on, but also he interviews her and kind of tries to find out the truth. This is more murder mystery with the true crime element. It's not like a on the edge of your seat, like fast-paced necessarily, but very entertaining, super funny. I laughed out loud a lot. Lucy was very funny as a character, and the audiobook was very good. The narrator did a really good job. Two narrators, it was one for Ben and one for Lucy. And also the true crime podcast really felt like real. You had like music, and just like the interview style of it was really well done. And yeah, you just have like the small town drama, a lot of sarcastic humor, some darkness going on, definitely some twists and turns. I will say I wasn't too shocked by like the final reveal, and so that was kind of like a little bit of a letdown, and the ending was like a little anticlimactic, but I definitely just enjoyed this experience of listening to this book. Another one with short chapters and just like an easy quick read. And yeah, I just loved Lucy. She was really snarky and just like didn't really care what people think at all, because she really has nothing to lose at this point. She just does what she wants, she says what she wants, and I thought she was quite funny. And I enjoyed Ben as well. I will also say there are a lot of affairs and infidelity in this town. Like the more you learned about some stuff that happened, that just kept coming out. So I'm not usually a fan of that in general or in books. You definitely have some unlikable and unreliable characters, which is kind of always entertaining. Definitely recommend fun, quirky, twisty, entertaining read. I have a quote here. Lucy said this one probably. People don't believe women who fight back. When a man lashes out, people say he's lost control of his temper or made a terrible mistake. When a woman does it, she's a psychopath. All right, next up, continuing on my anti-TBR spree, I read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I've had this on my TBR in the past, and I really enjoyed it. So you've probably seen people talking about this a lot, but in case you don't know, this is a contemporary romance with a magical realism time travel element. So it features Clementine, and she is best friends with her aunt, but her aunt passes away tragically, and she leaves her apartment to Clementine, and her aunt always said that her apartment was magical, but Clementine doesn't really know what she's referring to until one day Clementine goes home and there's a man in her apartment. She eventually finds out that he is from 7 years in the past. She is trying to figure out what is happening, and she is very interested in him, but trying to figure out how this could ever work. And she's also just kind of closed off and heartbroken. She just isn't so sure about jumping into this and how it's going to work with them being in different times. This is another book in New York. I read like 3 books set in New York. This is definitely like 13 going on 30 2000s rom-com vibes, which is great. It just was very like comforting and predictable in some ways. It's not a bad thing, I think. It was just very cozy. Really enjoyed the romance in this one, but it definitely touches on heavier things like grief and loss. It goes into also like deciding on and pursuing your dreams. Also lots of stuff with food, because Ewan, I think is how you say his name, he's the main love interest. He's a chef, so you get a lot of great food. And Clementine is in the book world also, like 7 Days in June, and she is a publicist, I think, so you get a lot of that. I will say there were times where I was a little bored when it wasn't focused on Clementine and Ewan. I just loved all their scenes and interactions. So there were some moments where I just wanted a little more of them, which usually I like when a romance has other stuff going on, but in this case, I just thought their romance was so sweet and almost magical in a way that I wanted more on them, like, the whole time. I do think this was like a unique and fresh take on a romance, so I really liked that. And I just loved Ewan. Like, he is so sweet, so thoughtful, spontaneous, really kind. He calls her Lemon, which I think is so sweet. He's one of my favorite like male main characters. I really enjoyed him. I will say I didn't feel super connected to Clementine. I didn't dislike her. I liked her as a character, but I didn't feel emotionally connected. Like, I didn't cry at all in this book, which I know a lot of people have said they did, and I was expecting that would happen, especially with what she had been through with her aunt, with her grief. I totally empathized with her experience, but I just didn't feel emotionally connected. I felt that way in 7 Days in June and not in this book, so I don't know what the disconnect was for me. I know she's very guarded and closed off, which was intentional, so maybe that's why I didn't feel as connected to her. I was hoping that I would have a bit more of an emotional reaction to this book, so that's really like my main reason why it's not higher rated, but I did really enjoy it, and the rating might go up over time. I think this was very good. I'm very happy I finally read it, and I do want to read more of her books. So here is a quote. "That was love, wasn't it? It wasn't just a quick drop. It was falling over and over again for your person. It was falling as they became new people. It was learning how to exist with every new breath. It was uncertain, and it was undeniably hard, and it wasn't something you could plan for." I realized I meant to talk about my DNF at the beginning, so I'm just gonna talk about it here. So I did have one DNF for the month. Unfortunately, that was my other in-person book club choice, and that was The Power by Naomi Alderman. I started out listening to this. I didn't really love the audiobook narration. I did have it on ebook, but honestly, I had so many other books I'd rather read physically that I just stopped after I stopped the audiobook. So I did love the premise of this. Basically a dystopian novel where teenage girls suddenly have this power that comes on. It's basically like electromagnetic shock, and they can harm and potentially kill other people. So the tables are kind of turned with women having the upper hand physically and just power. And that's all I know really, because I only made it like 25% in. So I loved the premise and concept. I was very intrigued and interested at the beginning. You're kind of getting bits and pieces of all these different girls who are getting their power. It's diverse, so you get people from all around the world. I did enjoy that element, but then I kind of lost interest as we got further into the story. Got a little confused. I kept forgetting who certain characters were because it kept jumping around. I just wasn't loving the writing style. I don't know. It just felt like it wasn't gonna be for me. I think this is a really interesting conversation starter, especially for a book club, but I just wasn't really gelling with the writing style, I guess, or the characters. So here's a reminder. You can DNF a book club book if you want, and it's okay. You can still go to book club and have fun. Next up, I read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I also talked about this in one of my recent videos, so I won't spend a ton of time, but wow, this is another contender for one of my top books of the year. I am so glad I finally read this. I was a little intimidated and putting it off. I have no reason to be afraid or intimidated because it was such a delight and it exceeded my expectations. So I don't even want to tell you what this is about. I feel like everyone says to go in blind. I'm really glad I did. I was confused for the first, 20, 30 pages. So you might be a little bit as well. I think it's intentional. You're kind of lost. But for me, at least by the 50-page mark, I started to understand what was happening. And there's always this sort of mystery that's going throughout the book. So you don't ever fully know until the end really what's happening, but it definitely got easier early on. I'm not going to tell you anything because I just want you to go in blind and experience the magic and wonder and mystery of this book. This is so atmospheric, just beautiful, great imagery. I forgot I was reading. I was just like fully immersed in this. Just could not stop reading. I did not want to put it down. It's beautiful writing. I think it says it's like hypnotic and dreamlike, which is just very true. It gave me like Narnia Magician's Nephew vibes. I feel like this was just perfectly paced and developed. It's a short book, which you never know if it's going to be fully developed as a story, but I think the length of it was perfect and just the pacing was great. I loved Piranesi as a character. At first, you kind of get this more scientific, rational, detail-oriented side of him, but then you kind of start to see he's also very like curious and optimistic, gullible even, but ultimately he's very lovable, and I just really enjoyed following him as a character. And clearly something is off. You just want to know like what is going on. And there were some funny moments too, but also some more melancholy stuff. This is a great exploration of how you perceive reality based on what you're told. If you read the book, you'll understand. Also, I really like the format of this book. It was told in journal entries basically from Piranesi's first person perspective, so you really get in his mind. I want to say more about this, but I don't want to spoil anything. So I'm just going to say, read this book and please tell me when you do, because I do want to talk about it. This was one of the Ellen Made book club picks for the month of June, and so I'm really excited to talk about that with her and anyone else in the comments. So I'm just going to say a quick quote that shows up at the beginning of the book and the end of the book and leave you there. The beauty of the house is immeasurable, its kindness infinite. There you go. Okay, I think I have two more here. So here's another book for my TBR. This was The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. I listened to this audiobook, and the audiobook was really good. Highly recommend listening to this book. This is a historical pirate fantasy story, and it centers around Amina al-Sirafi, and she is a retired, notorious pirate pretty much. She's at home with her daughter, just trying to slow down and live life at home, but she's approached by the mother of a former crewmate, I believe, and her daughter or granddaughter is captured by this mysterious bad man, and she wants Amina to rescue her, bring her back, and she offers a very hefty sum, which is very tempting to Amina. She accepts it and she goes off on the seven seas again. She gets her old crew together. There's definitely some fantastical, supernatural things going on. They discover that it's a lot more than it seems. It's not just a kidnapping. You get two POVs. You get the scribe, who is basically telling Amina's story from his perspective, and then you also get Amina's story where she's telling it. And I didn't know that this was historical, so that was a pleasant surprise. I think it's set in the 1100s. So this one, I was really into it for the first 70%. Then it took kind of a weird, ridiculous turn and lost my interest a little bit. Felt a little dragged on at the end. Other than that, I really enjoyed it. So I kind of started negative there. This was my lowest rated book of the month, but it was still an enjoyable time. I did enjoy the magical elements, and there were also some themes of motherhood here and not being held back as a woman. Like, Amina really wanted to show her strength to her daughter and let her know that she can do anything she wants, and just because she's a woman, that she doesn't have to give up on pursuing her dreams. And you have a very diverse cast of characters. Amina is Muslim, and you also have some African characters, Indian, Middle Eastern, and then Muslim, Christian. There's a queer character. You also get sorcerer, a demon. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Amina was probably one of my favorites. She is just awesome. Very funny, very smart, witty, like I said, strong and independent. You got a lot of her inner struggles with being a mom and being Muslim even, but being a pirate and trying to reconcile that all together. I really loved when specifically one character showed up at about the halfway point. I won't spoil it, but it was quite entertaining. Yeah, it lost me at the end a little bit and got a little ridiculous. But other than that, I thought it was good. It was entertaining. It was a fun time. Here is a quote. Our hearts may be spoken for by those with sweet eyes, little smiles, and so very many needs. But that does not mean that which makes us us is gone. I would not want Marjana, her daughter, to believe that because she was born a girl, she cannot dream. Okay, and the last one is The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. This was just a random one that I had on my Libby that came in finally. So this is her newest release, I think, and it's a thriller, mystery, Another great audiobook, Multicast. Highly recommend listening to it. And this is kind of a historical one, but it also takes place in like present day. So there's a couple different characters here. You have Ruby McTavish. She is the richest woman in North Carolina and also the most notorious. And she is known for being kidnapped basically as a young child, but also being a widow 4 times. So you don't really know what's going on with that. So she adopts Cam, and you learn that she died about 10 years ago, and Cam lives in California with his wife Jules. And 10 years later, after Ruby's death, they go back to North Carolina to their family house. A family member dies, so they go back home, and there's a lot of family drama, a lot of secrets and mysteries being revealed, and they also have their own things going on, Cam and Jules. Secrets they're keeping from each other. So you get lots of mixed media in this one. There's letters, emails, newspaper articles, and like multiple POVs. So Ruby, she has her own perspective. She's writing a letter right before she dies, and it's basically telling the truth of everything that happened in her childhood with her husbands and all that. And then you also get Camden and Jules's perspectives in the present day, and then you get like some newspaper articles back in like the 40s, 50s, 60s about Ruby. This one gave me Evelyn Hugo vibes. It's kind of in the historical setting with her multiple husbands with the Southern Gothic mystery thriller kind of feel. This is definitely more of a slow burn mystery, but very engaging. I really enjoyed all the different elements. I feel like they were really well done. A lot going on, but not too much going on. Definitely like a creepy Gothic house. There were some surprising reveals, but I did predict some of the main twists, so that lowered my rating a little bit, but I really enjoyed it and didn't want to stop listening. Ruby was probably my favorite part, getting her voice in her letters. She's very funny, outspoken. I really loved Jules too. There were some strong women in here, just lots of secrets, little reveals. So if you like really fast-paced, action-packed thrillers, this is not that, but it's definitely an enjoyable, entertaining, slow burn kind of mystery. So I thought this was a great one. I like this quote. When something as cataclysmically horrible as your husband being shot to death on your honeymoon happens, people are both fascinated and repulsed by you. Those are the books I read in June. All books I would recommend. So as always, let me know if you've read any of these, just your thoughts on these books in general, what you read in June. Let me know what's going on down in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!